It's a wonderful day to be at an air show, and if you're unable to come to Lakeland, Florida to the 45th International Fly-In and Expo, the second best thing is to join us on the Florida Aviation Network for some interesting interviews and some insights from aviation pioneers and movers and shakers within the industry. I'm Ron Timmermans, one of your hosts for the Florida Aviation Network, and I'm delighted to be your host today, and I'm having you join us for yet another interesting interview. We've had a great lineup of folks that we've interviewed so far this week, and more to come. The gentleman who's with me today is Mr. John Meekins. He's president of Privateer Industries. John, welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Good to meet you, Ron.
Yeah, it's not your first time at Sun and Fun, but I think it's your first time with interviewing with Florida Aviation Network.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Yeah, so John, how long have you been flying?
Oh, gosh, I've been flying a good many years. I got my license when I was 39, and
10 years or so ago.
It's been 10 years or so, in as much as I'm now 78, yes.
Okay, very good. Very good. And so what ratings do you have? I imagine it includes
I'm
seaplane.
a VFR pilot,
VFR pilot.
I have a glider rating, and that pretty much sums it up, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the last 10 years, you've told me that you've been working on a specific venture, developing a brand new aircraft soon to come to market. It's been a long, tough 10 years, and I'm sure you're excited to see the results that are now coming to fruition. Tell us a little bit about Privateer Industries and what you've been developing over the last 10 years, John.
Privateer Industries was started, Bill Husa, a Boeing engineer, and I got together and decided to build this aircraft. Privateer made its first flight on the 6th day of August at Titusville Airport in Florida. And Privateer is expected to be the world's safest and fastest amphibian, and we should achieve that goal within the next 30 days or 6 weeks.
Very good. So I think we've got a picture that of the Privateer aircraft that about which you were speaking. So there it is on the screen, and what I'm seeing is an aircraft that is, as you mentioned, an amphibious. It's got large floats, and it is unusual seaplane or an amphibious plane in that it has a low wing rather than a high wing that you would normally expect with an amphibious airplane. But the floats are out mounted underneath the wing, the low wing, and they have retractable landing gear in them as well. And this, of course, allows you to land on the paved runway as well as on the water. And where else can you land this airplane, John?
This airplane will also land on the grass or on the snow. We actually proved that the hard way recently with a hard landing at Melbourne, which wiped out a Piper Seneca earlier in the day, had the same misfortune with a crosswind, and I think they've scrapped their aircraft. Our aircraft, the repair was completed last week on our aircraft with the exception of landing gear. We're waiting for Breet in Seattle to finish the gear. But we actually got no more than a road rash out of the collapse of the gear.
So it turned out that it was a pretty stout airframe, and landing facility there at Melbourne is always unfortunate when you have an incident like that, but in this case it was offered a learning opportunity and a proof of concept for you that it is a very stout
Absolutely.
airplane.
Fortunate in that regard. We were to have been a showcase aircraft flying every day here at Sun and Fun, and really unfortunate that we didn't make it, but our next step is going to be to start our water work at Leesburg. Leesburg has just completed a ramp into the water. So we're going to be able to land on the runway and drive into the water for waterworks.
Very good. So the aircraft, the single prototype model is still at Melbourne, you said. Melbourne,
Yes.
Florida, just a little over an hour away from Lakeland, where we're at today. And you'll finish the repairs there to the landing gear soon and move it to Leesburg, which is also about a little over an hour away from Lakeland. So, but the facilities are there, and you said they're welcoming you to continue the test flying there. Will you have a continued test flying program, or this is where you're going to do the water qualification?
Yes, we have. Harvey Cleveland is our test pilot, and he makes himself available as required. So he and Rob Luck work together as a team, and they have worked together for a good many years on various projects. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. Yeah.
Very good. So this aircraft, we saw the picture of it a moment ago. It's hard to tell just how big the aircraft is. What is the anticipated seating capacity in addition to the pilot and co-pilot set?
This aircraft is a pilot-only aircraft with 5 to 6 passengers, making a total of 7 people. However, very important to understand that the aircraft is scalable up to 20 passengers using the same design.
Okay.
Very
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes.
That's interesting. So you just, stretch it, stretch the...
The engineers can scale it up to whatever the client wants, up to 20.
Up to 20.
With the same basic design. So it's going to be universally accepted, I think. In as much as it is the safest aircraft, the safest amphibian ever built, being a low wing and having floats that are unique. The floats, incidentally, were designed by Robert Gornstein. Gornstein is the guy who was instrumental in building the first high-speed ferry. He did the work on their underwater gear. So that makes us the safest, and the fact that they're incorporated into a low wing is going to make us the fastest. We're expecting to get 195 knots at sea level. And I think the next highest amphibian was 182, so we'll ring that bell fairly shortly, I think.
Very good. So anticipated 195 knots true airspeed at sea level for this aircraft.
215 knots at 15,000 is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Might not get it, but we'll see.
Well, we'll see. That's part of the proof of concept and the production flight testing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. And I forgot to ask you, is it pressurized cabin or non-pressurized?
The prototype is not, but it can be pressurized, yes, sir.
Okay, so you'll build the fuselage?
I assume it's going to be, but a lot of the pilots of amphibians are low guys. They don't go high, so the original model won't be pressurized. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense.
The Alaskan people are all typically below 15,000.
Yeah, well, even lower than that, probably.
Yes,
I would imagine.
That's right.
So that's good. And so, why did you choose a turboprop engine to push this propeller to turn this?
Bill
propeller?
Husa, the designer, chose the Walter 601 turboprop because of its popularity. You know, we've got a brand new airtime and a prototype. He didn't want a new prototype engine. He wanted something reliable and a lot of horsepower. I think we're developing somewhere between 600 and 800 horsepower.
Wow, 600 and 800 horsepower. And you did say it's a pusher propeller, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, so a turbine engine turning a propeller, pushing the airplane through the air to speeds that they expect would make 195 knots at sea level and 215 or thereabouts at 15,000
The pusher
feet.
prop is going to give us some things that many of the other folks don't have. We'll be able to load and unload passengers, for instance, with the engine running because it's behind us.
Okay.
And we'll also, of course, be able to go up on a beach and back off the beach using beta, reversing the prop. This is really the first new amphibious aircraft since World War II.
How interesting. So you can beach the aircraft by driving it
well,
up
not completely beach. You can go up, though, and enough to, so you don't get it stuck. But yes, sir.
And then you can put the prop in beta and back it off the beach.
Absolutely.
So you won't even have to get your feet wet.
That's correct.
How cool is that? Yeah. That's the kind of seaplane that I would
want.
Well,
we also have a very low radar cross signature, as much as we're carbon fiber. So the SEAL team is interested in the airplane as well.
That's for stealth operations.
Yes.
How interesting is that? So that's another possible marketing to the military.
Oh, absolutely.
For the
Archangel has visited us at Melbourne. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. So, John, I know you said you worked with Mr. Husa, now deceased, as I think you said. That's too bad indeed, but his design will live on past his demise. What was your inspiration for bringing a new aircraft to market, and how did you and Mr. Husa get connected?
Well,
to bring up
that's
this
an
design?
interesting story, if you will. I've always been interested in airplanes ever since I was a kid, and so I decided I would design an aircraft on my own, by myself, and I did. I designed a low-wing pusher amphibian with unique floats, and got a patent on it. I went to Crystal City and got a patent on this device, and I put it on the internet. And a friend of mine introduced me to Bill Husa, who had some comments on my airplane. And my first conversation with Mr. Husa was very interesting. Bill said, "I've seen your airplane." I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "It won't work, you know." And I said, "What the heck does that mean?" And he proceeded to show me where I had violated various laws of physics. And I was so impressed with the idea that a man of his stature would talk to someone of my lack of stature that I hired him on the spot, and we had a good time putting it all together.
Very good, very good.
That's a true story.
I'm sure it is. That sounds completely viable indeed. So, Mr. Husa first critiqued your design.
Yes.
Made you believe that he really knew what he was talking about, and
yes, he did.
Caused you to want to hire him to help you come up with the real thing.
Yes, sir.
So this is
right.
good. This is good. So, ingress and egress from the airplane, in the forward part of the cockpit.
Pardon me?
Is it the ingress and egress from the airplane? Is there a door?
It'll be over the wing.
Over
yes.
the wing.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Right. You'll step out on the wing.
The pilot has, incidentally, a separate door, which is a requirement of the Alaska guys. They don't want to use a common door, so it has that, and the interior is built to for the same reason. It has a space to put in a 4x8 sheet of plywood. You know, the Alaska guys are hauling refrigerators, and in as much as there are no roads, that's how things get in there.
Exactly. Yeah. So it'll be a cargo carrying airplane for the potential
yes,
customers in Alaska.
Yes,
so that's certainly so the bush pilots and the people in the northern part
bush
of Alaska.
Pilots, yes.
Yeah, they're one of your target customers for
yes,
this,
sir.
I imagine. And let's see. I think you said also that you got some international clients as potential targets.
We have been visited in Titusville 4 or 5 times by the Chinese. The Chinese are trying to build a civil aviation from scratch, and haven't been able to do it. The Chinese don't have any runways, so it's obvious that an amphibian would suit their purposes to begin with. We have talked to one of their agents and agreed to build the aircraft in the United States for the Chinese market. We're not going to build it in China. We're going to build it with U.S. help, and so that really is the most immediate market that we're looking to satisfy.
I see. Well, that's good to know. So the Chinese, you said, trying to build their civil aviation infrastructure and industry, but yet they have very few runways. But they have a lot of waterways, right. Rivers and
exactly.
lakes and the
yes,
like.
Sir.
And so this airplane would be ideally suited to service much of the communities in China through water landings and takeoffs, and then where necessary they would change to
exactly.
landings on the surface,
yes,
on the solid surface.
The water work we expect to be the easiest part of the whole drill. You know, our equipment was computerized and flown in a virtual situation where we had a virtual float in a virtual lake, and we proved the concept in that fashion. But of course, nothing like practicality and reality. But we look for the water work to be the easiest part of the whole drill.
Okay.
This aircraft, yeah.
So the water part is the easy part.
I think
the
so.
Landing gear to work on land is a bit more challenging.
It did prove to be with that crosswind, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was perhaps an unusual situation. That's understood, but that's how we learn, is from challenges that provide us opportunities to excel past that. So that's good.
Actually, it worked out. We proved that we can land on surfaces other than the blacktop, yeah.
Okay, good. So we're looking at a picture now on the video that shows the aircraft on the ramp at probably Titusville or Melbourne.
I think Titusville.
And it's on its landing gear on the solid surface. We can see the the large turbojet engine, turboprop engine on the back, spinning the propeller, and the floats are very long, and they go all the way back, and the tail, the T-tail, if you will, is attached to the back end of the floats and the like. And here's a shot of the aircraft in the air with the gear still down, about to come up. So it's electrically operated or hydraulically operated gear?
They're electro-hydraulic, if you will.
Okay.
As a point of interest, we were originally not allowed to retract the landing gear. And we also were restricted to one airport. You know, they have a designated representative, and he runs the show, lets us know what we can do and we cannot. We had to get permission to fly from Titusville to Melbourne, for instance.
I can imagine. It's more than just a ferry flight. Huh? I
Yes,
can
sir.
see that. And here's a picture looking at the airplane head on, and another one on its runway 2718 at Titusville, I imagine, the intersection at 2718. And it's nice to see it in the air, and I'm glad it's flying. It's wonderful that you've proceeded through this development process. I'm sure it's been a long and arduous task. Let me ask you, John, if you were having to do this again, starting like you did 10 years ago, what would you do different?
I wouldn't do it.
I was afraid you'd say that.
I really wouldn't. If I had any idea what attend this life, I never would have done it. Incidentally, if anyone would like to be on the first flight, we put a GoPro behind the test pilot. And if you go to YouTube and put in Privateer First Flight, you can be a part of the first flight.
Wow,
Yes,
wow. And there's no charge like there is on the Virgin Galactic
No,
Space
absolutely
Voyage 1,
not.
so that's great. So you're going to have a GoPro there so that you and I can join John and the test pilot and all those folks interested in the first flight of the Privateer. When do you think that'll be, John?
I'm not quite sure when it's going to be into the water. I hope it'll be there within the next 6 weeks.
Okay, good.
But privateerindustries.com, if you go on that website, you can follow the progress of Privateer.
Yeah.
I update it as I get to it, yeah.
Very good. So this is an interesting development where we can watch the last stages of the development and proof of this new concept in an amphibious airplane, one that has never had one designed like this before, and one that purportedly will be the safest and the fastest amphibious airplane around. You mentioned safety, John, so what have you built into the airplane to make it the safe airplane that you claim it to be?
Well, the fact that we are working with a low-wing aircraft and that the wind doesn't have any leverage on the plane makes it the safest. Amphibious accidents have tended to be where the wind actually flips the plane over in the water for one reason or other. They get up on a wave and the wind catches it along with the wave and they get flipped over. And this is not going to happen with a low wing.
So it's easier for the wind to catch a high wing and flip the airplane over.
Absolutely.
It's more difficult for the wind to get underneath
Absolutely.
the low wing and,
Yes, sir.
and have any leverage to flip it over.
That's-
Plus big wide pontoons or
Yes.
floats.
Well, they're wide, not very wide, but they're long. And
They're
that's
long.
another thing. This is not going to be a tippy airplane. It can't be. You know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the floats are known as semi-wave piercing floats. Not that we want to pierce any waves, but they should be able to handle a higher, a rougher sea than any plane to date.
I see.
That also makes it safe.
I'm sure it would. I'm
Yeah.
sure it would. Very good. And inside the cockpit, what will you offer in the panel?
Panel has everything. Would you believe I've never sat in the airplane?
I would believe it now that you've just told me, but I'm sad to hear that.
I've asked people have asked if I've flown it. I'm not allowed to fly it, of course. It's still in testing. But I also haven't been a passenger yet. I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And typically with this type of construction, it's 2 steps forwards and 1 step back. And sure as heck, if I took time off from my work to fly to Melbourne, it wouldn't happen. And so I actually haven't done it.
I
But
see.
the cockpit has everything that the rest of us have, you know.
Very good, very good. So we'll probably see some glass panel instruments and
Oh, yes.
GPS
Oh, yeah,
equipped,
sure.
of course. And
We already have these, I just haven't seen them.
You just haven't seen it, yeah. So while you're down here this week, are you going to make a trip over to Melbourne? And
I came from Melbourne.
Oh, you came from Melbourne, so
yes.
you've
yeah,
seen it.
I wanted to get the straight skinny on and get up to date on everything. So
Indeed.
I spent a day in Melbourne and looked at the airplane, looked at the repair, and so forth.
I see.
So
the repairs are all done with the exception of the landing gear?
With the exception of the landing gear, and the landing gear construction's underway. The boys are actually doing the nose gear here, and Breet in Seattle is doing the main gear. They're the ones who constructed it to begin with.
I see, I see. So they'll have that back on before long? You'll move it to Leesburg?
We think we'll be back up in 30 days to 6 weeks and over at Leesburg for waterwork.
That's
and we
great.
think the waterwork's going to go quickly.
Yeah, it's not no mechanical moving the gear up and down like you have with landings on the surface. Well, that's great. That's great. So we've learned a lot about the privateer industries and the new aircraft that you're bringing to the market. John, we wish you the very best in your continued endeavors. I know it's been a long 10-year path for you. And although I heard you say that you wouldn't do it over again, I'm so glad that you did do it this time.
So am I.
I'm sure.
I've learned a lot, and I love to learn.
Well, that's good. We all do love to learn. And so I believe what you're going to have is a safe airplane, of course, and one that will be probably the fastest amphibian ever, soon to be tested, both at sea level and at much higher levels and the like. So if you're around Leesburg in the next few weeks, you'll probably see a very unusual shaped airplane, a brand new design called the Privateer. And you may see it taxiing off the ramp into the water or taxiing back, maybe doing some water landings, maybe some land landings and the like. It'll be a joy to see that work, and then eventually you'll see them peppered all over this country and probably Alaska and most likely China as well. Our time is up with John Meekins, President of the Privateer Industries. It's been a delight to have you with us today, John. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us in the Florida Aviation Network. I'm Ron Timmermans, one of the many hosts of the Florida Aviation Network, and we're broadcasting to you live and in the clear from the 45th Annual Sun and Fun International Fly-In and Expo in Lakeland, Florida. Please come join us again soon.